Hi everyone, it's Vanna Cure over at Prosperity Now. I am going to go ahead and kick us off. Thank you all for joining us for today's call, which will be the first call in a series of 4 total calls that we're going to do just like this. But these calls are designed to discuss our 2021 policy priorities with the with the Prosperity Now community, as well as our national partners and just advocates who are interested in our work. So we're going to share our Prosperity Now federal policy priorities, talk a little bit about what these priorities will mean for your community, and then most importantly, hear from you all on what you're working on at the state or municipal level as it relates to each of our policy areas. And then also, more importantly, to talk about what we're going to do in response to these policies moving forward. So what type of advocacy actions we can take in response to these policies. So as you can see on the screen, on my screen, today's call will focus on our tax priorities. And you'll see here on the next slide, just a little bit about some upcoming dates that we have for the remaining 3 calls that we're going to do in this series. Next, in 2 weeks, we'll do our financial security priorities. On the 23rd, we'll have our affordable home ownership priorities. And then on March 9th, we'll talk about our consumer protections priorities. And this call really builds off of a blog as well as our federal policy priorities that we released late last year, which are going to be shared in the chat box for you to take a look at outside of this call. So this is just a little bit about where we're going with this series. Before we get started, I do want to go over a couple quick housekeeping items for you all. First things first, this call is being recorded and will be available online on Prosperity Now's website within 1 week of this call. Second, in order to ensure sound quality, we've muted you all, but we don't want you to shy away from engaging with us through this call. Like I said, we want this to be as interactive as possible. We want this to feel like an informal discussion where we're just talking policy, answering questions, hearing your comments and your concerns. So definitely feel free to use the chat box, which I have circled here, this little chat icon, to chat us your questions, your comments, and then mute yourself to speak up and ask a question. But again, just don't shy away from engaging. We definitely want this to be a 2-way conversation today. And then lastly, follow us on Twitter at Prosperity Now if you're not already doing so. And then just keep an eye on the chat box because we're going to share resources throughout today's call for you. Today's speakers, you all see my picture there and my face as well as I'm speaking, but in a moment here, I'm going to turn it over to Joanna Ain, who is our Associate Director for Policy here at Prosperity Now. She handles both our tax as well as our financial security portfolios here at Prosperity Now. So you're going to be hearing from Joanna over the next 2 weeks. And then I'm hearing someone who is not muted. Kent, I think that's you. If you will please mute yourself. I thought we had muted everyone, but if you're not speaking, please mute yourself. And then just a quick rundown of the agenda. Of course, like I said, the welcome, which I'm giving you right now. In just a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Joanna to start going over our 2021 tax priorities. After that, we will open up the floor for some discussion questions that I've got for you all, where we can have an open discussion and then get your questions on these policy priorities before we enter the year and doing advocacy and really trying to move these policies and push them forward. What questions do you have? We want to make sure you all have adequate messaging support and understand how we really want to try to move these policies forward over the next several months. And then lastly, I'll come back and talk next steps and how you all can get involved in advocating for these issues. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Joanna to kick us off and talk tax policy. Joanna?
Hi, friends. Joanna Ain here. Thank you so much, Vanna. So I'm an Associate Director of Policy at Prosperity Now. I focus on our tax policies and our financial security policies. So I'll be joining you again in 2 weeks for those of you who can make it. So thanks so much for joining us. And we're going to keep this moving. Again, as Vanna said, we'll have some room for discussion after. First, I wanted to just plug our Right Side Up report that came out last summer. This is, I think, the 3rd iteration of our Right Side Up report. So this is taking the tax system and thinking about it as a way to boost people up rather than tax the wealthy, rather than tax people of lower income. So it's kind of thinking about how to rearrange the tax system. It highlights a lot of the policies I'm going to be talking about here, talking about, again, how to turn the tax code right side up, but really a great resource if you want to dive into these federal policies. And hopefully we can get a, sorry, my chat wasn't on. Hopefully we can get a link to that if it's not already. Oh, thank you, Arohi. It's already in the chat. So just to start off, I think perhaps maybe one of the most exciting bills that we're going to talk about on our tax policy side is the American Opportunity Accounts Act. We also call this, I'm saying, AKA the Baby Bonds Bill. I know a lot of you are more familiar with that language. This was introduced in the 115th Congress, the 116th Congress. We are hoping it is going to be introduced in the 117th Congress. We know that our new President Biden has kind of given this a little thought to perhaps put in some kind of COVID relief package. We haven't seen it yet, but our fingers are crossed for that moving forward. Champions, Senator Booker, Representative Presley from Massachusetts, and then relevant committees, of course, are basically what I'm going to call our quote unquote tax committees. So our Senate Finance Committee and our House Ways and Means Committee. So just to take a step back, the American Opportunity Accounts Act, this is going to give every child born in America a seeded account with $1,000, and then annual contributions will be given by the federal government dependent on a family's household income. So those annual contributions can go up to $2,000 and can be as little as none, depending on the family's income. We're going to have a slide in a second. So the idea of this bill, we're going to help level the playing field for children of color, for our low-income families. It allows them to invest in wealth-building opportunities, such as housing, such as retirement, once they reach adulthood. So they will have access to this account once they turn 18. And just to give you, because we love visuals, I personally am a visual person, right? So we have the child is born, they get $1,000 that's kept in this account. It's invested in treasury bonds. And then each year, our lowest income kids are going to get $2,000 a year. So for our lowest income kids, this can mean almost up to almost $45,000, $50,000 once we take in, thank you for the pointing, Vanna, once we take into account interest. So the number there is 46,215, right? This is an average, but that's a really huge chunk of change for a young adult, someone who's 18 years old. Again, this is to invest in education, in housing, in retirement. This really just gives them that bump up. And then our highest income folks, they'll be given that $1,000 to start with, so they'll get $1,681 approximately right when they turn 18. So you really see that big, depending on what your income is, there's a big difference there. And of course, if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I know a lot of members of our policy team are on the call, so we'll be sure to get to those. Another policy that we've been working on for several years is our Refund a Rainy Day Savings Act. This was introduced in the 114th Congress, the 115th Congress, the 116th Congress. It is a bipartisan bill. So on both the House and the Senate side. So we have Senators Booker, Senator Cotton, Senator Young, are engaged in this bill and are leading on the bill. Of course, Senator Jones is no longer a senator, but was engaged in previous years. So we'll have to kind of think through what a new Democratic senator might be moving forward. And then our representatives, Representative Watson Coleman, Representative Hill, have been great champions on the House side. So we're really lucky to have those folks. Again, a bipartisan bill so that, the hope is perhaps in a big tax vehicle in this next coming year or so, that this bill can be included. Relevant committees, Senate Finance, House Ways and Means, to start with, there are also a couple other ones. Senate help is also one, because of the AFI provision, which I'll get into in a second. So this bipartisan bill, it allows families to defer 20% of their refund by opting into the program. So we know that the tax refund, people get a huge boost at tax time from their tax refund. So this is just helping families to think a little bit about putting some of that aside for emergency savings later in the year. So they're able to defer 20% of their refund, and this is then transferred to their account 6 months later with interest. Now, there is a provision in this bill. I didn't quite have enough space for this, but we'll get into it in the next slide. But there is a provision in this bill for those who get EITC, so our lower income families, to get a match, to get potentially a 50% match. So that incentivizes them even more to take part in this program. Again, this is an opt-in program. And the other thing I just want to mention before we talk about this infographic is that there is also a provision in this bill to authorize the AFI program. So I know a lot of you are familiar with AFI. It was defunded. We're having, the possibility of refunding it, authorizing it. So we are still having those conversations, and that is in this bill as well. So to get to this infographic, right? So this allows a family to receive a tax refund, and then 20% of it is going to be deferred until 6 months later, and then they get this boost. The second part of this infographic, however, it is the first. They get this boost, but then the idea is if they can also get a 50% match, or lower income families, then they get even more 6 months later, even more of a boost 6 months later. So right now, again, there is a provision for a pilot in the legislation. The other thought is that perhaps this can be reintroduced with that match saving component, that being more center stage. So we will kind of see what we can do in Congress and may need your help moving that forward. And yes, Van is just bringing up the DC City Council. If you want to kind of see what can be done with a proposal like this, they introduced a similar rainy day savings bill, and they actually have that matched component in there. And the federal government would give them the match. Thank you, Mimi. So moving on, I wanted to talk a little bit about expansions to the EITC and CTC. So starting, I know we've had some new information around with the American Rescue Plan that Biden proposed recently. So I'll first talk about the Working Families Tax Relief Act, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the proposal that Biden came out with, because I think that's really important to take a look at, especially kind of in the lens of how we can improve the EITC and the CTC. So as most of you know, because you are all tax people, the EITC, the CTC, the Earned Income Tax Credit, and the Child Tax Credit, these are really key anti-poverty programs in the United States. They help boost tax refunds once a year. So lower income families get a really big boost at tax time. So the Working Families Tax Relief Act would expand the EITC to childless adults and families with young children. It would make the CTC stronger for lower income families by making it refundable. And then it would increase the effectiveness of low income tax credits in Puerto Rico. And then it's like a whole smorgasbord of great tax stuff. And then it creates paid tax preparer regulations. So all this great stuff in this bill. To be more specific, it expands the ages of those who could get the EITC. Right now it's from 25 to 64 years old. It would expand that to 19 years old to 67 years old. Again, the CTC would be made fully refundable, so that $2,000 every year would be fully refundable. There would be an additional credit of $1,000 for folks with children under the age of 6. So a lot of really great things. It was introduced in the 116th Congress. It had all this Democratic support in the Senate. Our champions were Senator Brown, Senator Bennett, Senator Durbin, Senator Wyden, and then Representatives Kildee and Evans. And then, of course, the relevant committees, again, our tax committee, Senate Finance, and House Ways and Means. So really great bill. I think this will continue to be pushed out. However, the American Rescue Plan, that proposal that President Biden came out with, did some really great stuff as well, especially to the child's tax credit. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard this. It expanded that tax credit. Now, the downside is that this is just for 1 year. So the Working Families Tax Relief Act that you're looking at right now, that's a proposal that's moving forward. President Biden's plan is, again, for 1 year. So there is a difference there. However, President Biden's plan, among other things, would expand the child tax credit from $2,000 to $3,000 for kids ages 6 to 17. It would make it even more at $3,600 for folks with a kid who's 6 or under 6. This would benefit, some sources say benefit 27 million children. It would reduce the poverty rate among children under 18 from 13.6% to 7.5%. So really make some big changes. And then lastly, in terms of the EITC, it would allow folks who are 65 and older to apply to the EITC. So that would be really incredible. Again, downside for the CTC provision, just 1 year, but really does some fantastic things. So we'll have to see where that comes up in congressional legislation moving forward. So last thing I want to mention, I know a lot of you are supporters of VITA or workers of VITA or site coordinators for VITA, the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program. We were really pleased to see funding go up to $30 million this year. Thank you so much for your support. And I know we don't have a slide up here, but we will continue to advocate for VITA funding at $30 million moving forward. That was just such a great achievement, and we just wanted to thank you all for all your advocacy. So Vanna, I think we can keep going. I know you had some questions for the group.
I did have some questions, and Joanna, you actually breezed through through your priorities quicker than I expected. But there was a question. I'm going to say Zora. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. But are there plans for the proposed locations for the pilot? I don't know if I think she may be talking about refunds for rainy day.
Yeah. No, we are not there yet, but that's a great question. That would be something like it would go out, and I suspect folks would apply for that, but that we're not there yet, and that is a great question.
Thank you for that question. And so I wanted to kind of shift gears here and have a discussion with you all and hear from you all, get your responses to these policy priorities, and then get your feedback on some other questions here. And like Joanna mentioned a second ago, these 3 tax priorities are things that we've been pushing for and kind of, priming to get us to this point. But we've been pushing for these priorities the last few Congresses, and this Congress in particular, we really think that there's a strong chance for some real movement on these 3 issues. So in addition to these, we'll also be advocating for all things VITA, of course, as we do every year, and then low-income tax credits. If there are additional things with EITC and CTC that come up throughout the year, those are always priorities of ours here at Prosperity Now. But these are our 3 probably biggest policy priorities that we're going to be pushing through the year. So with that, some questions for you all. And I see, Joanna, you just posted here the DC bill in case anyone wants to take a look at that. But a couple questions that I want you all to think about and answer for us, and hopefully unmute yourselves and let's have a conversation here and just talk a little bit more about these priorities. But do any of these policies align with your own priorities there that you're advocating on, either at the federal, state, or local level? What tax-related policies are you prioritizing in your state? Most importantly, number 3 here, what resources or supports do you need from Prosperity Now for your own tax-related advocacy? How can we be helpful to you all? And then question number 4, how would you like to continue engaging with us on tax-related advocacies? on tax-related advocacy, excuse me. We are wondering if throughout the year, as Baby Bonds moves, would it be helpful for the Prosperity Now community for us to quickly pull together calls like this to strategize around our advocacy efforts, how we move forward, how we drum up support around these bills. So if these calls would be helpful for the community, or something lighter like email updates to you all, or we have an online policy tracker where we list our policy priorities, and it's an automated thing. As they begin to move, there's updates there. So just wanting to get a sense of how we can be helpful to you all, and then get a sense of what you all are working on, or if these policies align with some of the things that you're working on. Because of course, we are always stronger when we collaborate and sound a more unified voice if we're working on similar issues. So I will stop talking and hear from you all. Feel free to unmute yourself, type in the chat box just your thoughts, questions, comments on these policy priorities.
So hi, everybody. This is Mimi Turchnetz from Boston. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I realized I was muted.
So I would just say that that we're doing some of our advocacy is specifically with a group called the Healthy EITC Families Coalition, in partnership with a lot of folks across the state. And so the Sherrod Brown bill very much aligns with the work that we're doing. We've been able to increase the state EITC in Massachusetts to 30%. We continue to try to expand that to 50%. And then there's going to be some state legislation around a guaranteed income. And so a lot of that stuff tracks with the Sherrod Brown bill. We're also doing a bunch of work on credit building, or specifically, on credit and debt fairness. And then just in terms of the baby bonds bill, I mean, that has been a priority for a lot of folks in Massachusetts since we had a federal Boston Federal Reserve working group on the racial wealth gap coming out of that Duke Boston Fed study. So there's been a lot of interest in Massachusetts on baby bonds, and so that we're really excited about the fact that Ayanna Pressley did in fact file that bill. So I would say that there's a lot of parallels between your priorities and ours. Always great to have calls, just kind of looking at 3 and 4, always great to do calls, always great to kind of do some of the tracking, some of the hands-on advocacy. So yeah, so thanks for identifying these and moving this forward.
Great, thank you for sharing, Mimi. And I know that you said you all are working with the Healthy Families Coalition, but if there's any other messaging support that we can help you all with in terms of baby bonds or EITC, don't hesitate to reach out. Joanna and I are going to leave our email address at the end of today's call on one of the next slides, so definitely feel free to reach out via email. Let's see,
Vanna, there's a comment from Lynn Weckworth in New Jersey about lowering EITC eligibility to 18. Apparently New Jersey was able to already lower it down to 21, and now they're hoping to get it down to 18. And they're also hoping to get a New Jersey child tax credit to make New Jersey's child and dependent care credit a refundable credit. So I just wanted to share that for anyone who is not looking at the chat.
Great, thank you, Lynn. I didn't see that. This chat moves very quickly, so it went up, but thank you. And I know that Holden's on the line. He does our state policy work, so this is something for him to consider as well and to note as well.
Hello, this is Amina Kirk with Change Machine, and we are working on tax simplification. So the EITC work is very important, looking at raising the max for childless adults, increasing the income limit, and expanding the age limit for to cover older working adults. So that's all extremely relevant. and then boosting it. Student loan cancellation and reform is also something we're looking at. And of course, it's gaining traction on the national stage. So we will be working more on that this year. And then asset limit reform is something that we're also looking into for the upcoming year. And thank you for this. It will be great if we can connect with others around the country who are working on similar policies, including Prosperity Now.
Great, thank you, Amina, and that's why we wanted to do this call, is to not only present these policies to you all and talk about how they align with your work, but also make some connections among folks who are going to be on the call, and hopefully we can continue to do that. We've got an advocacy listserv that we're constantly trying to get conversation going, and it's an email listserv, but whatever way we can do it to continue to have conversations and make sure folks have partners elsewhere in the country who are working on similar issues is always great. And we're also going to have, we're going to talk more about asset limits in our financial security priorities call 2 weeks from now. So we'll talk about that. And then anything debt related, I know that Mimi mentioned debt stuff as well. We have a consumer protections call coming up in a couple weeks as well. Any other comments or questions? I want to leave enough space for folks to ask questions and get clarity on anything related to these policies. Any questions that come up come to mind as Joanna was talking? Yes.
Hi there. This is Radha from Saber Life. Thanks so much for hosting this call. It's really helpful just to get a quick policy overview of these bills. We are developing a policy platform right now, a national policy platform, and so this is really helpful and timely. We would love to plug into any trackers you may have for this legislation. We would also love to plug into state-specific trackers. For instance, we're tracking the California EITC, and the eligibility of that is slightly different than the federal EITC. And as we message that out to our membership, it's great to know what the current legislation looks like.
Great, that will not be a problem, Radha. And what state were you from? I know you said you were from Saber's Life.
Yeah, from Saber Life, and it's based in San Francisco. Nationwide. Gotcha.
And then we do have a federal policy tracker. I'll show you in a slide or two down the line, but I'll show you what that looks like and how you can access that.
Thank you so much. That's great.
You're welcome. And I'll pause again. Hopefully other folks with questions, comments, and
I have a question about the rainy day piece, the rainy day 2.0. I'm just wondering, for those of you that are in DC and have more, I think, access or knowledge to what kind of support there is. I know you can't look into the future, but do you think or do you anticipate there might be, a stronger sense of support for something like this going forward, even though you've introduced it or it's been introduced previously? And then just as a side note, coming from a state where we don't have a state income tax, it just really, the impetus for us is to support any, federal legislation around tax equality in the tax code, whether it's, increasing, expanding EITC, just because we don't have those resources available at the state level. So it's exciting for me to see what other states are doing, New Jersey, Massachusetts, but at the same time for us in Texas, we really depend on the federal tax code as a needs to reimburse and alleviate poverty for very low working families that we serve. So
yeah, thank you so much for the question. I think that's really interesting, right? Because it's a bipartisan, the Refund and Rainy Day Savings Act is a bipartisan bill, right? We know that we now have a Democratic Congress and administration. So the question being, is this have a higher likelihood of passing now? I do think definitely in a lot of ways it does. More folks know about it. We've been talking about this bill for a really long time. I think you guys have done such an amazing job at promoting things like big picture tax time, but things like VITA and EITC and CTC, and it's now becoming more and more into that into conversations we're seeing, even just like looking at the media, I just think people are even more aware of why those things are so helpful to low-income families. So thinking about the EITC, the CTC, tax refunds, and how to make those better and more effective, and to give lower income people more of an opportunity to use them in a way that it will be helpful to them. I think that's definitely gaining momentum. So yeah, I guess bottom line, I would say, I think there is a higher likelihood now of it passing. I also think that, sorry, I just lost my train of thought as per usual. I also think a lot of that is around luck. You know, what tax legislation is going to come out? What tax vehicle can we get that into? But so much of this is also relying on your all's continued advocacy, you to put the message out, and then thinking through an expansion of this bill so that it will create a match for low-income people who get the EITC, so that it will give them an extra incentive to put that money aside. I think that's really important too. So yes. I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to say yes, there is a stronger chance now more than ever, and I'll end there.
Thank you, Joanna. And I see someone's bubble is lighting up. I don't see a name here, so if someone was about to speak, I will let you. Go ahead. Okay, hearing nothing, maybe that was just some movement in the background. But yes, we are going to remain optimistic and stay positive, Joanna. Like I said, we've done a lot to promote these policy priorities over the last few years, so we're hopeful, you know, with a new landscape here in Washington, D.C., that we can get some of these moving through committees passed, and it's obviously not possible without our advocacy network. And that's, again, why we want to hear from you and make sure you all don't have any lingering questions or any comments or anything that you want to add to this discussion. So before I move on and talk next steps and how to get involved, wanted to open it up one last time to see if anyone has any responses to any of these questions.
I have one more. I was just going to say on number 3, I remember after the summit or during the summit, there were some direct sort of call to action, and you had on the website, like, here's exactly who you should call, and here's, you know, outlines of what you could say. And I felt like that was really helpful. Just, again, to the extent that we can mobilize other people in our network that don't do this, you know, on a day-to-day basis, just having those scripts is very helpful.
Yes, and we will do that, of course, this year as well. As these bills begin to move, as we hear about, you know, things getting ready to be introduced, we're going to reach out to our network through our email list, like we always do with that same thing, our pre-drafted emails and call scripts and everything for you. And I'll show you that in a slide or two here in a second. But we will continue to do that stuff. But like I said, I think it's always helpful to have calls like this so that you all don't blindly get email alerts to take action on baby bonds and not really have a good sense of what the bill is all about. So we thought we'd put together these calls to really just kind of lay out what's going on and what we're going to be focused on for the year. So I don't want to harp here and take up too much time on this slide. So hearing nothing else, I'm going to move on here and talk about how you can get involved going forward. First things first, this upcoming Friday is EITC Awareness Day. It's something that we celebrate every year at Prosperity Now, and we're going to put a link to a toolkit here in the chat in just a second. But it's a way for us to build awareness, build support build awareness for the Earned Income Tax Credit, but also build support for VITA sites across the country. It's a social media campaign. We have shareable graphics in this toolkit. We have sample social media messages. We have little videos, which I've screenshot here, all just to build awareness around the Earned Income Tax Credit. We know that with stimulus payments going out last year, there may be some confusion on, the earned income tax credit, where that fits in during the tax filing season. So there's some language in there in this toolkit about that. But if you all would help us this Friday promote EITC Awareness Day, use the hashtag. Everything that you need to help us promote it is in that toolkit there. And we've got resources for practitioners, for taxpayers, for everyone. We've got I think for researchers and policymakers as well, but there's a little bit of something for everyone in the toolkit. And all we ask of you is just to help us promote it on social media and also promote it in your communities as well. If people have some of these questions about EITC, then there's probably some resources in there for you. So that's first thing. And then secondly, someone mentioned, I think it was Rada, you mentioned earlier about following along via the tracker. On our website, we're going to post a link to our Action Center, our Advocacy Center in the chat box as well. But we do have a federal policy tracker that you'll see. We haven't updated it yet because these particular tax bills have not been introduced in the 2 to 3 weeks that we've been in this Congress. But once they've been introduced, they'll be added here to this federal policy tracker. It's of course a lot bigger on our website. This is just a little screenshot. But every time these bills move or something happens, it'll just auto update here. So it's a quick and easy way for you all to follow along with what's happening with these bills outside of us doing calls or sending out emails. It's just a quick way to go and take a look at what's happening with these policies. So I'd encourage you all to go check out this federal policy tracker. And then also on that same page to go ahead and register for our Prosperity Now Advocacy Center, which as was talked about a moment ago, this is where we send out our alerts. So when things are moving with baby bonds, with rainy day EITC or some of our other bills, we'll send out quick email action alerts for you all to email, call, tweet at members of Congress. Sometimes we'll do sign-on letters or things like that. But we'll always provide some sample text for you all. In addition to you all taking action in our Advocacy Center, if you all are ever there and want to use some of the language that we're using in our email alerts, feel free to copy them, paste them if you're working on similar issues, and steal our language to use in your communities as well. But just know that our Prosperity Now Advocacy Center is there. If you're not already registered in it, please do so during this call. It just makes it easier to reach out to legislators, and you can do so in your own time outside of our action alerts. Just visit and do any of these things while you're there. And just another quick slide there on the Advocacy Center. And then lastly, I do want to leave Joanna and I's contact information for you all. Like I mentioned, you all see the 3 tax issues that we're going to be working on, in addition to some of the work that we'll be doing at the state level throughout the year. So if you ever have questions or need messaging support, or if there's any way that we can be supportive of you all, please don't hesitate to reach out to Joanna or myself via email. Joanna, I should have put your Twitter handle on here. You're getting pretty popular on Twitter these days, unlike me. So. But don't hesitate to reach out to one of us if you have questions about these policy issues. There it is. She just posted it in the chat. So there's our email addresses there. Let us know how we can be helpful to you all. And then next steps for you as we wrap up here, and then I'm going to pause for a second to see if anyone has any lingering questions or comments before we sign off here. But our next call, like I said, will be in 2 weeks. We'll focus on our financial security priorities. On February 9th. So please join us for that if you are doing anything financial security related, asset limits, SNAP, TANF, any of that stuff, join us next week. And then, like I said, if you're not already registered in our Advocacy Center, the link is there in the chat for you. So please register so that you will be prepared to take action when these policies and others start moving throughout the year. So before we log off, anyone have any questions? And Joanna, I thank you for saying that. We will also talk emergency savings as well as retirement savings for our financial security call. Any other questions, comments that we can answer while we are on the call? And match savings. Thank you, Joanna. You just continue to add to the chat. Anything else come to mind for anyone? Lynn, I see your bubble is lighting up. I don't know if you have a question, comment, or if you are moving the mouse or something over there, but I'll let you. Okay, maybe not, Lynn. I think maybe that was go ahead. Okay, maybe not. I think that was a mistake. Well, with that, thank you all so much for joining us for our first in this series of calls. Like I said, I hope it was helpful to hear about what we are working on here at Prosperity Now. You have Joanna and I's email address, so if we can be helpful to you all, please don't hesitate to give us a read or a shout, and we will do what we can to assist you. So thank you all so much, and have a great rest of your day.